If I had $1 million, I would put it in a bank and just live off the interest without doing anything. How many times have you heard a sentiment like this? Are people who earn interest really not doing anything to earn it? In our last lesson, we learned about the universal fact of time preference. We found that time preference referred to the fact that acting individuals always favor satisfying the same end sooner rather than later. We saw that low time preference was one of the most important elements necessary for the creation of capital, and this is how a society becomes prosperous. In this lesson, we will learn about the time market and the phenomenon of interest. Capital goods are the way stations toward the creation of consumer goods. More productive capital goods put society closer in time to the final products they want to consume. Therefore, we can see that capital goods are not just the result of natural resources and labor mixed into a productive tool, but they are a form of stored time. In praxeological terminology, capital and time are interchangeable terms because more capital enables an entrepreneur to be closer in time to achieve his goal. The goal of entrepreneurs in a market is to have the capital goods whose productivity is high enough that the cost of production is lower than the price of the final product. To put it simply, the goal of the entrepreneur is to profit. In order to realize profitable ventures in a mature market economy, the production of most goods require the act of indirect exchange. In this case, money itself becomes a capital good within a structure of production. Therefore, entrepreneurs will many times want to store their savings in a non-specific, or in other words, a very convertible, capital good. Money being the most accepted good for transactions in the market is therefore among the most convertible capital good an entrepreneur can have in his possession. And thus, money is a useful form of stored time. This fact explains the common phrase, time is money and money is time. Money is a capital good. People use money in order to facilitate their exchanges for goods they ultimately wish to consume. In the rest of the lesson, we'll explain how money does not just facilitate exchanges in one time frame, but across multiple time frames.
So you think you got what it takes?
I'll tell you what I got.
In our lesson on entrepreneurship, we learned that the entrepreneur hires workers at a discount. Workers accept lower wages for the relative certainty of a contractually agreed salary, while the entrepreneur is subjected to the inherent uncertainty and risk of bringing a product to the market.
You're hired.
Shit.
Because he bears the risk, the entrepreneur is the one who earns the profits. We also called these same entrepreneurs capitalists, because they are responsible for the savings which facilitate a production process. In our lesson on market prices, we found that a uniform price for all goods tends to form in the market. This is because all entrepreneurial activities, through competition, contribute to reduce profits. By properly identifying market demand, entrepreneurs drive market prices towards a hypothetical final price or equilibrium, where no more profits could be made. Of course, this point is never reached in reality. But we can use the concept of this hypothetical world of final prices to help us extrapolate the function of the entrepreneur as a capitalist. If we held all other things equal, a structure of production with no possibility for profits or losses would essentially be a riskless venture. With no risk present, the owner of a business would cease to be an entrepreneur. But he would still be a capitalist. This is because, even without risk, a structure of production would still require previous saving in the form of capital goods. And even without risk or profits, the capitalist would still command a higher sum from the consumer than the total money he pays to the laborers and the suppliers of natural resources. But why? The capitalist's function is to supply time to the production process. The capitalist, through acts of saving in the past, has amassed time in the form of money and other capital goods, and advances that time to his employees and to the owner's natural resources. The capitalist thus relieves workers of the burden of waiting through all the stages of production until the final consumer good is sold. And this fact would be true even if we imagined a world with no uncertainty.
Founders Fund is an early investor in Airbnb, Compass Pathways, and Asana. He was an individual investor in Asana and Luminar at their...
No matter how you cut it, time is a necessary element in the production of complex consumer goods. Therefore, if we continue to imagine a world where there is no uncertainty, and therefore no profits or losses, it is the capitalist's precise role as supplier of time which explains why he earns a larger sum from consumers than what he pays to the workers.
How about me, boss?
Oh, yeah, one for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
And one for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
And me, boss.
One for you.
Owners of land and labor sell their present goods and services for present goods they desire, money. Capitalists buy these labor services and natural resources with a present good, money, in exchange for anticipated future goods. The capitalist purchases the anticipated future goods now so that he can sell them in the future once they have matured. If we take into account the fact of time preference, we can now see that there logically must be a discrepancy between the price paid for a good in the present and that same price paid in the future. The present good is more valuable and thus commands a higher price. To put this into perspective, let's continue imagining a world with no uncertainty and suppose that a capitalist loans out 100 ounces of gold with the agreement that the debtor will pay him back 105 ounces in a year's time. The additional 5 ounces on the repayment of the debt is a result of the inverse time preference of the exchangers. The lender values 105 ounces in a year from now, more than 100 ounces in the present, while the debtor values 100 ounces in the present more than 105 ounces in the future. This ratio can also be expressed as 5% per annum. This ratio is called the rate of interest. And because we are imagining a world with no uncertainty, this is a pure rate of interest. That is, there is no profit intertwined to the price of the repayment, like in the real world, where premiums for risk are included. Without the capitalist performing this vital function, laborers would have to wait for the entire production process to finish and sell their final product to the consumers before they could acquire their desired income.
Look, I'm sorry, this isn't possible. This is
Well, I could compensate you by fully funding your dig.
And this is a very unusual time.
For a further 3 years.
So instead, they choose to accept a discounted present good in the form of money. As we can clearly see, the capitalist's function is to supply time. The role of capital, and therefore the capitalist, cannot be eliminated from the reality of production. Therefore, any economic system which claims to have eliminated the role of capital would essentially be claiming that their production processes take no time. And we now see that the premium included in the return of an advanced capital good is therefore simply the value of time determined by the price spread through each production process, and we call this the rate of interest. The time market is therefore the market for capital goods. Most people refer to the market for money loans, but this is not the only time market, and not even necessarily the dominant one. Money loans are a form of credit, where lenders issue present money for a claim of future money. But all producers, goods, and services which are transformed over time in a production process into the final consumer's good are also part of the time market and do not require repayment. They are not credit transactions. These machines and labor services are purchased at a discount in the present from their expected future value. So if a worker whose productivity will be 20 ounces a year from now is hired by a capitalist, it's obvious that the capitalist cannot pay him his entire 20 ounces now. And this is why a capitalist will always earn a higher net income from the sale of the final consumer's goods.
I think I deserve a raise.
How much do you make?
$200 a week.
Give me a number.
310.
No one makes that around here, not even close. How about 2 1/4? Say yes.
Yes.
I'll throw in new business cards. You drive a hell of a bargain.
In our previous example, we imagined a world where there was no entrepreneurial risk. This obviously helps us isolate the exact role that capitalists play in a structure of production. But in this imaginary construction, money itself would be useless. The entire purpose of money is for people to have something to trade for the goods they desire, precisely because there are uncertainties at a moment of exchange. Will my product meet the needs of the consumers? Will they have something I value in return? Will I reach an agreement on the divisibility of the goods involved in this exchange? Obviously, money solves all of these problems. Therefore, to apply what we learned about capitalists who provide present goods in return for more future goods, let us now introduce uncertainty back into our analysis. In the real world, capitalists who engage in any process of production bear considerable risk, and they are therefore simultaneously entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurial profit and loss are always mixed with the rate of interest. Sometimes, what may seem like a net profit in a business transaction is actually a net loss when due account is taken for interest. A common mistake of the layman is to simply look at the revenue of a business and assume that they can simply subtract the reported costs and determine the profit margin. But we can now see the importance of the role that time plays in every production process. Interest rates are affected by the time preference of the individuals who borrow and lend, and if they fail to complete their entrepreneurial ventures in the proper amount of time, capital consumption ensues. The market interest rate emerges on the market for loans and capital goods when individuals eliminate the differing time preferences of lenders and debtors. That is to say, arbitrage opportunities emerge when there are differing interest rates on the market. For example, let's assume that one individual's evaluation of the ratio of future and present goods is at 15% per annum.
If I give you this money and you don't pay me back, there are no rules. You never get to say fuck you to anybody ever.
And another individual's evaluation of the ratio of future and present goods is at 5% per annum.
Okay, you take this, you're mine. Okay. You understand? You don't pay, you know what we do? I cut you at waist. Peel your skin up over your head and tie a knot in it. You don't die from this. You suffocate. Okay.
A keen entrepreneur could sweep in and make a profit by borrowing money from the individual offering lower interest rates and lend money to the individual offering higher interest rates. Thus, just as we have seen that the market prices tend to lower to where supply meets demand through competition, the market tends to develop a going rate of interest for loans. Obviously, time is a valuable good which has to be economized, and the time preferences of those individuals acting in the market will permeate to the time market. Interest rates are a key factor in the returns of any venture. In the real world of risk and uncertainty, although interest is included in the returns of entrepreneurial ventures, they must be understood as an element separate from the returns on taking a successful risk in the market. The market interest rate is the result of the competing time preferences of individuals buying and selling time on the market. They create the going market ratio between the desirability of goods in the present and goods in the future. These ratios are the pure interest rate of the market. These interest rates are always positive because people are always acting, therefore, always preferring things sooner rather than later. In other words, people always have a positive time preference. Historically, interest was called usury and was a shunned element in business transactions. Later, some schools of thought mistakenly came to think that interest was the result of the productivity of capital.
Every loan comes with interest, a set amount of money that's added on to the final loan amount as a surcharge for borrowing. Now, how much you pay in interest depends on your interest rate, a prearranged percentage of the loan amount.
No matter which school of thought they come from, all other theories of interest amount to interest being merely a pricing on loans. So people figure that the problem ends up being a mere scarcity of availability of money, rather than the reality of scarce real goods. They advocate the lowering of interest rates and create the illusion that they have converted scarcity into prosperity. As we will see in the coming lessons, these actions have dire consequences.
our interest rates down to 0 or less, and we should then start to refinance our debt. Interest costs could be brought way down while at the same time substantially lengthening the term. So restructuring our debt or restructuring our debt here, I guess it would take care of his deficit problem.
The fact that we do account for time is our greatest advantage in understanding the logical implications of human action. Including time as a factor in production makes praxeology the realist school, and firmly leaves other unrealistic assumptions in its wake.